The locker slammed shut, the sound ricocheting through the empty hallway like a gunshot. Ethan Carter stood frozen, his heart pounding as Caleb Reed's shadow loomed over him, all sharp edges and menace. By senior year at Lincoln High, Ethan had learned one truth. Survival meant avoiding Caleb at all costs, so he thought. It was a crisp September morning in suburban Ohio, the kind where the air smelled of damp leaves and promise. But for Ethan, it was just another day navigating a minefield. He was 17, scrawny, with hazel eyes that saw too much and a secret he guarded like a fragile glass ornament. He was gay, and in a small town where different was a dirty word. That secret was a death sentence. Caleb, the school's golden boy quarterback, prom king, untouchable, had made it his mission to torment Ethan since freshman year. A shove here, a cruel taunt there, each one carving a deeper wound. Today was different, though. Ethan felt it the moment Caleb cornered him by the lockers, his broad shoulders blocking out the fluorescent light. "You're gonna help me, Carter," Caleb growled, his voice low, almost desperate. Ethan blinked, confused. Help him? The guy who'd once dumped Ethan's backpack in the cafeteria trash. "I need to pass calc, or I'm off the team." "You're the nerd, right? Tutor me." Ethan's first instinct was to laugh, but the look in Caleb's blue eyes, raw, unguarded, stopped him. There was something beneath the bravado, a crack in the armor. "What's in it for me?" Ethan asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Caleb leaned closer, his breath warm against Ethan's cheek. "I'll make sure nobody messes with you." Deal. It was a deal with the devil, Ethan knew. But what choice did he have? Being invisible was better than being a target. He nodded, sealing a pact that would change everything. The first tutoring session was a disaster. Caleb showed up late to the library, sprawling in the chair like he owned the place, his Letterman jacket slung over the back. Ethan tried to focus on derivatives, but Caleb's presence was a storm too loud, too close, too everything. "You're not as useless as you look, Carter," Caleb said after Ethan explained chain rules in a way that finally clicked. It wasn't a compliment, but it wasn't an insult either. Ethan clung to that. Over weeks, the library became their battleground. Caleb's taunts softened into teasing, his smirks less cruel. Ethan noticed things he hadn't before, the way Caleb's jaw tensed when he was frustrated, the faint scar above his eyebrow, the way he'd linger after sessions, asking random questions about Ethan's life. "You ever think about getting out of this dump?" Caleb asked one evening, his voice softer than usual. Ethan shrugged, hiding his dreams of college, of freedom. "Doesn't everyone?" One night, as rain drummed against the library windows, Caleb didn't leave. He stayed, helping Ethan stack books, their shoulders brushing. "Why do you let me get away with it?" Caleb asked suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan froze, unsure what he meant. "With what?" "With being an asshole to you." Caleb's eyes locked onto his, and Ethan's breath caught. There was no mockery there, only a raw, searching intensity. For the first time, Ethan saw Caleb not as a bully, but as a boy carrying his own burdens. "Because," Ethan said, heart racing, "I think you're more than that." By winter, the deal had shifted. Caleb's teammates stopped shoving Ethan in the halls. The whispers died down. But it wasn't just protection. Caleb was there waiting by Ethan's locker, sharing his fries at lunch, texting him dumb memes at midnight. Ethan told himself it was just the deal, but his heart betrayed him, fluttering every time Caleb's laugh filled the air. One freezing January night, everything changed. They were at Caleb's house, sprawled on his bedroom floor, calculus textbooks forgotten. Caleb's parents were out, the house quiet except for the hum of the heater. You ever feel like you're hiding who you are? Caleb asked, staring at the ceiling. Ethan's stomach twisted. He'd never told anyone, not even his best friend Mia, about his secret. But Caleb's voice was so raw, so real, that Ethan couldn't lie. Yeah, he admitted, barely audible. I'm gay. The words hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. Ethan braced for rejection, but Caleb just turned to him, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he reached out, his hand resting on Ethan's. Me too, Caleb whispered, and the world tilted. They didn't kiss that night, but they really talked for hours. Caleb confessed how he'd buried his truth under bravado, how tormenting Ethan had been a twisted way to keep him close without admitting why. Ethan shared his fear, his loneliness, the way he'd always noticed Caleb, even when he hated him. When Caleb's hand tightened around his, Ethan felt something new, hope. Spring brought a fragile new reality. They were careful, meeting in separate late-night drives, stolen moments in the library stacks. Caleb was still the quarterback, still the king. But with Ethan, he was just Caleb funny, vulnerable, fiercely protective. Ethan fell hard, and it scared him. Love wasn't supposed to feel like this, like a tightrope over a canyon. But the world wasn't kind to boys like them. One day, a rumor spread someone had seen them together. Too close, too quiet. By lunch, the whispers were a roar. Ethan's heart sank as he saw Caleb across the cafeteria, surrounded by his teammates, his face a mask. Would he deny it? Would he turn back into the bully to save himself? Caleb didn't. He walked straight to Ethan's table, sat down, and slung an arm around him. The cafeteria went silent. What? Caleb snapped at the staring crowd, his voice daring anyone to challenge him. Ethan's chest swelled with pride, with love, but also with fear. This was only the beginning. The fallout was brutal. By the next morning, Lincoln High was a battlefield. Graffiti on Ethan's locker screamed slurs. Caleb's teammates iced him out, their loyalty crumbling under the weight of small-town prejudice. Ethan wanted to run, to disappear. But Caleb was a rock, unyielding. We're not hiding, he said, his voice fierce as he wiped the paint off Ethan's locker with his sleeve. Not anymore. But courage came at a cost. Caleb's father, a former football star with a temper to match, was the first to strike. Ethan overheard the fight one night when he snuck over to Caleb's house, hiding in the shadows of the porch. You're throwing your future away for him, mister, Reed bellowed. Caleb's voice shook but didn't break. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing who I am. The slap that followed echoed in Ethan's ears. And when Caleb stumbled out, a bruise blooming on his cheek, Ethan pulled him into his arms without thinking. They drove to the edge of town, parking under a sky heavy with stars. Caleb was quiet, his hands clenched into fists. I'm sorry, Ethan whispered, guilt clawing at him. Caleb shook his head, his eyes blazing. Don't you dare apologize for this. For us. Then he kissed Ethan, hard and desperate, like he was proving something to the world. It was their first kiss, and it tasted like defiance. School became a gauntlet. Ethan's parents, liberal but cautious, worried about his safety. Maybe you should keep this quiet until college, his mom suggested, her eyes soft with concern. Ethan wanted to scream. Quiet meant invisible, and he was done with that. Caleb, meanwhile, faced worse. His coach benched him, citing distractions. His friends vanished, replaced by glares and muttered insults. Yet Caleb never wavered, holding Ethan's hand in the halls, his chin high. One afternoon, Mia, Ethan's best friend, pulled him aside. You sure about this? Caleb's not exactly a saint. She wasn't wrong. Ethan still remembered the sting of Caleb's old taunts, but he also knew the boy who stayed up late texting him poetry he'd never admit to writing. The boy who'd stood up to his own father for him. He's trying, Ethan said. That's enough. Prom was the breaking point. Ethan hadn't planned to go to much scrutiny. Too many eyes, but Caleb insisted. We're not letting them win, he said. And Ethan couldn't say no to the fire in his voice. They arrived together. Caleb in a sharp black tux. Ethan in navy. Their hands clasped tight. The gym fell silent. Then erupted in whispers. A few kids clapped, but others sneered. When the principal tried to separate them during a slow dance, Caleb laughed, loud and defiant, and pulled Ethan closer. Let him stare, he murmured, and Ethan's heart soared. Graduation loomed, a bittersweet horizon. Caleb's grades had improved, thanks to Ethan, but his football scholarship was gone. Ethan, accepted to NYU, dreaded leaving Caleb behind. Come with me, he blurted one night as they lay on a blanket by the lake, the summer air thick with possibility. Caleb laughed, but his eyes were serious. New York. Me. I'd be a fish out of water. Ethan touched his cheek. You'd be with me. That's enough. They made a new deal that night. They'd face the world together. No matter what. Caleb applied to community college in New York. And when he got in, Ethan cried, overwhelmed by the weight of their shared future. They moved that August, trading Ohio's small-minded streets for the chaos of the city. It wasn't easy. Caleb worked nights at a diner. Ethan juggled classes and a part-time job, but they had each other. Their tiny apartment was a sanctuary, filled with laughter, late-night talks, and the kind of love that felt like a miracle. One evening, as they cooked dinner in their cramped kitchen, Caleb wrapped his arms around Ethan from behind, his chin resting on Ethan's shoulder. You know I'd do it all again, right? He murmured. Ethan turned, meeting his gaze. Even the bad parts. Caleb's smile was soft, unguarded. Especially the bad parts. They led me to you. But the past wasn't done with them. A year into their new life, Caleb got a call from his mother. His father was sick, cancer. Aggressive. Caleb didn't want to go back. But Ethan saw the guilt in his eyes. You'll regret it if you don't, Ethan said, squeezing his hand. So they returned to Ohio, stepping back into a town that hadn't changed. Caleb's father was frail but unrepentant. His words sharp even from a hospital bed. You're still my son, he said, but I don't understand you. Caleb didn't flinch. You don't have to. I'm happy. Ethan watched Caleb navigate the visit with a strength he hadn't known he possessed. They stayed a week, reconnecting with Mia, now a local activist, and even visiting Lincoln High, where the graffiti had long been painted over. On their last night, Caleb took Ethan to the lake, the place where they'd made their second deal. I want to marry you, Caleb said, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. Ethan laughed through his own tears. Is that a proposal? Caleb grinned, pulling out a simple silver ring. Damn right it is. They married in a small New York courthouse the next spring, surrounded by a handful of friends, Mia, a few college buddies, and Caleb's mother, who'd softened over time. Ethan wore a simple suit, Caleb a tie that didn't quite match. But their vows were poetry, raw and real. I was lost until you, Caleb said, his voice breaking. Ethan's heart felt too big for his chest. You were always my home, he replied. Life after the wedding wasn't a fairy tale, but it was theirs. Caleb transferred to a 4-year college, chasing a degree in physical therapy. Ethan thrived at NYU, his writing earning praise from professors. They fought sometimes over money, over whose turn it was to do dishes, but every argument ended with apologies. laughter, and tangled sheets. At night, Ethan would listen to Caleb's steady breathing, marveling at how far they'd come. Then came the dreams. Caleb had always talked in his sleep, mumbling nonsense about football or food. But one night, Ethan woke to a low, possessive growl, "Mine." Caleb's arm tightened around him, even in sleep, and Ethan's heart skipped. It became a ritual every few nights. Caleb's subconscious would claim him, a reminder of the fierce love that had carried them through hell. Ethan never told him, cherishing the secret like a gift. But the world still tested them. Ethan's internship at a progressive magazine brought him face to face with stories of hate crimes, discrimination, and families torn apart. It hit too close to home, stirring memories of Ohio's cruelty. One night, after a particularly grueling article, he broke down, sobbing into Caleb's chest. "Why does it have to be so hard?" he asked. Caleb held him, his voice steady. "Because we're worth it. Because love like ours changes things." Inspired, Ethan pitched a feature about their story, anonymized, but raw. The magazine published it, and the response was overwhelming. Letters poured in from kids like them, trapped in small towns, desperate for hope. Caleb read every one, his eyes shining. "We're doing something good, aren't we?" he said. Ethan nodded, kissing him softly. "We're giving them a light in the dark." Their activism grew. They spoke at local LGBTQ+ events, sharing their journey from enemies to lovers. Caleb, once terrified of vulnerability, became a beacon of strength, his humor and honesty disarming even the skeptics. Ethan wrote more, his words weaving their love into a call for change. They weren't famous, but they were heard, and that was enough. One summer, they returned to Ohio for Mia's wedding. The town felt smaller now, less suffocating. At the reception, a former classmate approached them, his face sheepish. "I was a jerk back then," he said, glancing at Caleb. "I'm sorry." Caleb clapped his shoulder, his grin easy. "We're good, man. Life's too short." Ethan watched, proud of the man Caleb had become, forgiving, but never forgetting. That night, as they danced under fairy lights, Ethan felt a peace he'd never known. The boy who'd once cowered in hallways was gone, replaced by someone who'd fought for love and won. Caleb whispered in his ear, "You're still mine. You know." Ethan laughed, resting his forehead against Caleb's. "Always." But peace was fragile. A week later, back in New York, Ethan got a call from Mia. A local teen, inspired by their story, had come out to his family and been kicked out. Without hesitation, Ethan and Caleb opened their tiny apartment to him. Jaden was 16, scared and defiant, a mirror of their younger selves. They helped him find a shelter, connected him with resources, and became his makeshift family. It was exhausting, but it felt right. The years blurred. Caleb graduated, landing a job at a rehab center. Ethan's writing took off, his essays published in bigger outlets. They moved to a slightly less cramped apartment, adopting a scruffy dog named Max who loved Caleb almost as much as Ethan did. Their love deepened, rooted in shared battles and quiet moments cooking together, binge-watching bad sci-fi, stealing kisses in the rain. One night, as they lay in bed, Caleb's growling "mine" woke Ethan again. This time, he laughed softly, shaking Caleb awake. "You're talking in your sleep again," he teased. Caleb blinked, groggy but smiling. "What did I say?" Ethan kissed him, slow and sweet. Just the truth. Their story wasn't perfect. There were still fights, still fears, still a world that didn't always understand. But they built something unbreakably, a life forged from pain, courage, and love. Ethan thought back to that first deal, struck in a desperate moment by a locker. He'd survived high school, but more than that, he'd found his soulmate. 10 years after that locker room deal, Ethan stood in their Brooklyn apartment, staring at a photo from their wedding day. Caleb's arm was around him, both of them laughing, eyes bright with promise. The frame sat on a shelf beside Jaden's high school diploma, proof of the family they'd built. One choice at a time. Their activism had grown into something bigger. Ethan's writing inspired a nonprofit, Light in the Dark, dedicated to supporting queer youth in rural areas. Caleb, with his knack for connecting with people, led workshops, teaching kids like Jaden how to stand tall. They weren't rich, but they were rich in purpose. Their love a quiet rebellion against a world that tried to break them. One autumn evening, they hosted a fundraiser at a local community center. The room buzzed with allies, survivors, and kids who'd found hope in their story. Jaden, now in college, gave a speech, his voice steady as he thanked Ethan and Caleb for saving him. Ethan's eyes welled up, and Caleb squeezed his hand under the table, his thumb tracing familiar circles. Afterward, they walked home through the crisp New York night, Max trotting beside them. Caleb was quiet, his brow furrowed. "What's up?" Ethan asked, nudging him. Caleb stopped, pulling Ethan close. "I keep thinking about that kid I was," he said. "The one who hurt you. I don't know how you forgave me." Ethan cupped Caleb's face, his heart aching with love. "You didn't just change, Caleb. You fought for it. Every day, you choose us. That's why." Caleb's eyes softened, and he kissed Ethan, slow and deep, under a streetlight's glow. Max barked, impatient, and they laughed, the sound carrying into the night. Their life wasn't without scars. Caleb still tensed when they visited Ohio, memories of his father's rejection lingering. Ethan struggled with anxiety, the weight of their public story sometimes too heavy. But they faced it together, leaning on each other, on Max, on the community they'd built. Every mine, Caleb growled in his sleep, was a reminder they belonged to each other, irrevocably. One night, as they sat on their couch, Max sprawled across their laps. Ethan opened a letter from a teen in Texas. "Your story saved me," it read. "I'm not alone anymore." Ethan handed it to Caleb, who read it silently, tears streaking his face. "We did that," he whispered. Ethan nodded, his voice thick. "We're still doing it." On their 10th anniversary, they renewed their vows in a small ceremony by the lake in Ohio, the place where Caleb had proposed. Mia was there, Jaden too, and a handful of others who'd become family. The sun set in a blaze of orange, and as Ethan spoke his vows, he thought of the boy he'd been, terrified and alone. He looked at Caleb, now his husband, his partner in every sense, and felt whole. "I made a deal with my bully to survive," Ethan said, his voice carrying over the water. "But you gave me so much more. You gave me a life, a purpose, a home." Caleb's eyes shone, his grip on Ethan's hands tight. "You're my everything," he said simply, and the words held a decade of battles, triumphs, and love. As they danced under the stars, Ethan realized their story wasn't just theirs anymore. It was a beacon, a testament to what love could endure, what it could build. They'd survived high school, hate, and doubt, not just to live, but to thrive, show others they could too. And as Caleb pulled him close, whispering mine one last time, Ethan knew they'd keep fighting, together, for as long as they had.